Emily was only 29, but her face often looked older than her age. Long nights and endless stress had left soft lines around her eyes, and tiredness always lived in her bones. She worked at a small, cozy restaurant in the heart of Chicago. The place was known for its warm lighting, friendly staff, and live piano music in the evenings. Most customers never realized the young waitress serving their food was raising a son all by herself, struggling every single day just to make ends meet. It had been nearly 8 years since Emily became a mother. Jacob was born on a cold February night during a snowstorm. His father had promised to be there for both of them, but within a year he disappeared without a trace. No phone call, no letter, no support, just gone. Emily was left alone with a newborn baby, a heart full of fear, and a bank account with barely $100 in it. She cried for weeks, but life didn't pause for heartbreak. She picked herself up and started looking for work. Over time, she found a job at the restaurant. It wasn't glamorous. The pay was minimum wage, the hours were long, and some customers could be rude. But the staff was kind, and the manager, an older woman named Teresa, always made sure Emily could take a short break to call Jacob during her shifts. That kindness meant the world to her. Jacob was a quiet boy. He didn't talk much to other kids and preferred being alone. But there was something magical about him. From a very young age, Emily noticed that he would tap on furniture or the windowsill like he was playing a song. He could listen to a tune once and hum it perfectly by memory. At first, Emily thought it was just a cute habit. But one evening when Jacob was 5, she brought him to the restaurant to pick up her paycheck. That's when it happened. A guest had just finished playing the piano near the front window and left his sheet music behind. The place was nearly empty. Emily let Jacob sit on the bench while she quickly signed her name at the counter. She turned around after 2 minutes and saw something that froze her in place. Jacob was playing a soft, slow melody one he had just heard a few minutes earlier. His tiny fingers moved gently, but with purpose. He wasn't just hitting keys. He was making music. From that moment on, Emily knew her son was different. He didn't know how to read music. He had never taken lessons. But somehow, he understood the piano like it was a part of him. The problem was that she couldn't afford lessons, not even cheap ones. Her rent was overdue every month, groceries were bought with coupons, and her shoes had tiny holes in them that she covered with black marker. She hated that she couldn't give Jacob the tools to grow his gift, but she promised herself one thing: she would never crush his love for music. Whenever the restaurant was nearly empty and her shift was ending, she would let Jacob sit at the piano for a few minutes. He would wait quietly in the back, reading a book or drawing with a pencil while she worked. And when it was safe, when no one was rushing to eat or drink, she'd lift him gently onto the piano bench and whisper, "Go ahead, baby." Jacob never played loudly. He knew not to disturb the peace. His fingers would float across the keys, barely making sound but enough to fill the air with beauty. Emily would watch him while wiping tables, her heart full of a strange mixture of sadness and pride. Sometimes a tear would roll down her cheek, and she would quickly wipe it away with the sleeve of her apron. People noticed. A few regulars would smile and ask, "Is that your boy?" She'd nod proudly and reply, "Yes, he loves the piano." Some left bigger tips on those nights. Others told her she should take him to a music school. She would smile and say thank you, never explaining how impossible that was. One rainy Thursday evening, something different happened. The restaurant was quiet. Only 3 tables were occupied. Emily's shoes were soaked from walking through puddles. On the way to work, and her back ached from carrying trays all day, Jacob sat quietly in the corner, as he usually did, reading a book about space and planets. Emily glanced at the clock. It was nearly 9:30 p.m. The last guests were finishing. Desert. She began wiping the tables and waved at Jacob. He knew the signal, placed his book down carefully, and walked over to the piano. Emily bent down, scooped him up under his arms, and gently lifted him onto the bench. The boy didn't say a word. He looked at the keys for a moment, closed his eyes, and began to play. What came out of the piano that night was nothing short of magic. It was a melody no one had ever heard before. It wasn't copied from another song. But Jacob was creating it right there on the spot. The notes flowed together like a story, sometimes joyful, sometimes sad, and always beautiful. The sound was soft, but powerful. It was like the piano was, telling secrets from a dream. One by one, people began to turn their heads. A couple stopped talking and just listened. A man who had been checking his phone put it down and leaned back in his chair. Even the cooks in the kitchen peeked out. The only sound in the restaurant was Jacob's music. Emily stood there holding a dishcloth, her hands frozen. She watched her son and felt her throat tighten. She had always known he was gifted, but this was something else. He looked so small on that large piano bench. Yet the music he created filled the entire room like sunlight. What Emily didn't notice was that someone new had come in. A well-dressed older man in a dark coat had entered quietly and taken a seat in the corner. He looked around the room, his eyes settling on the boy at the piano. Something about his face changed. His hands resting on the table curled slightly, and his eyes began to water. The man's name was Mr. Charles Whitaker. He was a billionaire, not the flashy kind. He didn't wear gold watches or drive loud sports cars. He was quiet, private, and incredibly wealthy from years of business in real estate and finance. Most people didn't recognize him on the street, and he liked it that way. He had built orphanages in foreign countries, donated millions to hospitals, and funded schools anonymously. He had money, but he also had pain. 15 years earlier, Mr. Whitaker had lost his only son, Daniel. Daniel was 10 years old when he died from a rare heart condition. Like Jacob, Daniel had been a piano prodigy. Music had been their bond. After Daniel's death, Mr. Whitaker locked away the piano in his mansion and never listened to music again. It was too painful. The memory of his son playing those keys haunted him. But tonight, something called him into that restaurant. Didn't know why he walked in. Maybe it was the sound he heard while passing by. Maybe it was fate. But when he sat down and heard Jacob play, he felt a piece of his heart stir for the first time in years. He watched Emily as she wiped tables, completely unaware of the man sitting just a few feet away. He saw the way she looked at her son, not with ambition, but with love. Not with pride, but with awe. He noticed her shoes were wet, her apron was worn, and her hands looked tired. But her eyes were full of light when she looked at Jacob. The boy finished his song quietly. There was no applause, just silence. The kind of silence that follows something too beautiful to speak about. Jacob turned to his mother and she gave him a gentle smile. "That was lovely, sweetheart," she whispered. He slid off the bench and she took his hand. Just as they were about to leave, Mr. Whitaker stood up and approached them. Emily turned, startled. She quickly lowered her head and said, "I'm sorry, sir. I hope we didn't disturb your meal." The man smiled kindly. "On the contrary," he said in a soft voice. "Hey, your son just gave me something I thought I'd never feel again." Emily was confused. He looked at Jacob, then back at the man. "It just likes to play," she said shyly. "He doesn't just play," Mr. Whitaker replied. "He speaks through music. That boy has a gift." Emily didn't know what to say. Compliments came now and then, but this felt different. "Do you give him lessons?" the man asked. She shook her head. "No, sir. I wish I could. But we can't afford it right now." Mr. Whitaker reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small, elegant business card. He handed it to her. "If you ever want him to have a future in music," he said, "call me. No pressure. Just think about it." He turned and walked away, leaving Emily frozen in place, staring at the card in her hand. Jacob looked up at her. "Confused? Who was that, Mommy?" Emily blinked slowly, still holding the card tightly. "I'm not sure, sweetheart," she whispered, "but something tells me our lives might be about to change, for the first time in a long time." As they stepped out into the rainy night, Emily felt something in her heart she hadn't felt in years. Hope. After that rainy night, Emily couldn't stop thinking about the old man in the dark coat. His voice still echoed in her head. "Your son just gave me something I thought I'd never feel again." She kept the small business card tucked safely inside her wallet. She would pull it out at night and stare at it as Jacob slept beside her, listening to the sound of his soft breathing. The card was simple. It had no company name, no title, just the name Charles Whitaker printed in silver letters, and a phone number. That was it. Nothing else. Emily didn't know who he really was. She had no idea he was one of the wealthiest and most influential men in the country. To her, he was just a kind stranger who'd seen something beautiful in her son's music. Days passed, and she didn't call. Not because she didn't want to, but because she was afraid. People didn't offer things for free, life had taught her that the hard way. Every time something good came along, it was either taken away or turned out to be a lie. What if he wanted something in return? What if he wasn't who he said he was? Still, the memory of that evening wouldn't leave her. The way the customers had stopped eating, the way Jacob's music had filled the room. The look on Mr. Whitaker's face, he wasn't pretending. He was truly moved. One evening, as she was folding laundry in their tiny apartment, Jacob walked over, holding his plastic toy keyboard. "Mommy," he said, "can I have a real piano one day?" Emily smiled softly. "Maybe someday, sweetheart." Jacob looked down at the keyboard. "I want to play for people again, like at the restaurant." His voice was gentle, but it carried a dream. That night, as Emily lay in bed, her mind kept returning to the card. Maybe this wasn't just about a stranger offering help. Maybe this was her chance to change her son's future. The next morning, after walking Jacob to school, Emily stood outside the building with her phone in hand. Her fingers trembled as she typed in the number. She hesitated, took a deep breath, and pressed call. The phone rang once, twice, and then a soft, calm voice answered. Double quotes, "Hello, this is Charles Whitaker." Emily's throat went dry. "Hi. This is Emily. I'm the waitress from the restaurant. It's the one with the little boy who played the piano." There was a pause. And then she heard him smile through the phone. "Ah, yes. I was hoping you'd call." She exhaled with relief. I didn't know if I should." "I understand," he said kindly. "But I meant what I said. Your son has something very special. I'd like to meet with you both, if that's all right." Emily agreed to meet him the next afternoon at a cafe near the school. She spent the rest of the day nervous and distracted. She borrowed a nice coat from a coworker and made sure Jacob wore his cleanest clothes. The next day they walked hand in hand to the cafe, unsure of what to expect. When they arrived, Mr. Whitaker was already there, sitting at a corner table with a cup of tea. He stood up when he saw them and smiled warmly. "Emily, Jacob," he greeted, shaking her hand gently. "Thank you for coming." Jacob hid behind his mother, shy as always. Mr. Whitaker knelt down slowly, so he was at Jacob's eye level. "I really enjoyed your music, Jacob," he said. "You have a gift." Jacob smiled a little but didn't say anything. Emily sat down. Nervously, Mr. Whitaker didn't waste time. He got right to the point. "I don't usually do this," he began, "but something about your son's music. It touched something inside me. My own son used to play the piano too. He passed away many years ago." Emily looked at him with quiet sympathy. "I'm so sorry." Mr. Whitaker nodded, eyes a little glassy. "Thank you. I haven't listened to a piano in a long time, but when Jacob played, it was like hearing my son again. It wasn't just the music, it was the emotion behind it, the way he played like he was telling a story." Emily listened quietly, unsure where this was going. "I'd like to help him," he continued. "There's a private music academy here in Chicago, one of the best in the country. It's very expensive, very selective, but I have connections. If you're willing, I can arrange for Jacob to have a scholarship. Full tuition, lessons, instruments, everything." Emily's mouth fell open slightly. She blinked, unsure if she had heard correctly. "A scholarship?" "Yes," he said calmly. "You won't have to pay a cent. I'll take care of all the costs. I'd also like to arrange for you two to move into better housing. Nothing fancy, just safe and close to the school. I can help you find a better job as well, something with better hours and pay." Emily didn't know what to say. Her eyes filled with tears. She had lived so long in survival mode that she didn't know how to handle generosity. It felt unreal, like a dream. "Why?" she finally asked. "Why are you doing this for us?" Mr. Whitaker looked down at the table, his voice soft. "'Cause I couldn't save my son, but maybe I can help yours. And because the world needs more beauty like the kind Jacob creates." Jacob leaned into his mother's side, sensing the emotion in the air. Emily looked at her son, then back at Mr. Whitaker. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," he replied gently. "Just say yes." And she did. Over the next week, everything began to change. Mr. Whitaker arranged a private audition for Jacob at the music academy. Emily watched nervously as her son walked into the grand building with its tall columns and quiet hallways. Inside the audition room, he sat at a grand piano much larger than the one in the restaurant. He didn't seem scared, simply closed his eyes and began to play. The teachers and directors sat in stunned silence. The boy played like someone twice his age, with feeling, grace, and an understanding of music far beyond his years. When he finished, one of the instructors whispered, "That boy is something else." Jacob was accepted immediately. They were offered a modest apartment near the academy, with clean rooms, working heaters, and no broken pipes or leaky windows. Emily cried the first night they moved in. She cried because she didn't have to sleep with her purse under her pillow anymore. She cried because Jacob finally had his own bed. She cried because, for once, she wasn't afraid of tomorrow. Mr. Whitaker checked in with them regularly, but never overstepped. He was always respectful. He introduced Emily to one of his friends who ran a small publishing firm. She was offered a part-time job doing data entry with flexible hours, perfect for a single mother. It wasn't high-paying, but it was more than she had made as a waitress. Jacob began attending the academy the following week. Every morning, Emily would walk him to school, and he would skip ahead happily, lunchbox swinging in his hand. He wore a backpack too big for his tiny frame, and always carried a small notebook where he jotted down melodies. The school had world-class instructors, practice rooms with Steinway pianos, and other students who shared Jacob's passion for music. At first, he felt out of place. Many of the other kids came from rich families, but when he sat at the piano, all those differences disappeared. Music made them equal. He made his first real friend a girl named Lily, who played the violin. They would sit together during lunch and talk about music. She was the first person who told Jacob, "You're amazing," and meant it without jealousy. Back at home, Emily couldn't believe the transformation. Her once quiet, shy son was growing more confident. He smiled more. He hummed constantly. He wrote little songs and played them for her in the evening. Their apartment, though small, was filled with music and laughter. It felt like a real home. And through it all, Mr. Whitaker never asked for anything in return. One afternoon, Emily invited him over for dinner. She cooked pasta with garlic bread and used real plates instead of paper ones. Even borrowed a tablecloth from a neighbor. When Mr. Whitaker arrived, he brought a gift, a small framed photo of a piano in a field under a sunset. "I thought you might like this," said. Emily placed it on the shelf next to Jacob's drawings. They ate dinner together, talked about books, movies, and music. It was warm, simple, and full of kindness. Jacob played for him after dinner, a short piece he had written himself. When he finished, Mr. Whitaker was silent for a moment. Then he smiled. "That was beautiful," he said softly. "Your father would be proud." Jacob looked at him curiously. "I don't really remember my dad." Emily watched as Mr. Whitaker gently placed a hand on Jacob's shoulder. Then, "Let's make new memories together." Emily felt something shift in her heart. This man had entered their lives as a stranger, but now he felt like family. Not because of money or gifts, but because of his heart. That night, after Mr. Whitaker left, Emily stood at the window and looked out at the stars. For the first time in years, her heart wasn't full of fear, it was full of peace. She looked at her son sleeping soundly, his notebook full of songs resting beside him, whispered, "You're going to go far, Jacob, and I'll be right here, every step of the way." She meant it. Jacob's life was beginning to change in ways Emily had only dreamed about. The music academy was like a whole new world full of shiny instruments, talented students, and teachers who believed in him. But along with this new life came challenges that Jacob had never faced before. The world outside the restaurant and their small apartment was bigger, louder, and sometimes scary at the academy. Jacob met many kids who were gifted just like him. Some could play the violin so beautifully, it made your heart ache. Others could compose music on a computer that sounded like it came from another planet. At first, Jacob was shy and quiet, afraid that he didn't belong among these kids who seemed so confident and sure of themselves. He often wondered if he was really good enough. Emily noticed the change too. She saw her son's shoulders tense. When he came home tired from school, his eyes sometimes looking distant, as if carrying a heavy weight. But she never pressured him. She only asked how his day was, and listened carefully when he wanted to talk. She understood that this new path wouldn't be easy. One cold autumn afternoon, Jacob came home later than usual. His fingers were cold. His cheeks flushed from the chilly wind outside. Emily waited at the door, worry showing in her eyes. "How was your day, sweetheart?" she asked gently. Jacob shrugged, but then took a deep breath. "It was okay," he said softly. "Some kids said my music is weird. They don't like it." Emily's heart tightened. "Weird," she echoed. "What do you mean?" He looked down at his shoes. "They said I don't sound like other kids. They told me I'm different, and maybe I don't belong here." Emily reached out and hugged him tightly. "Jacob," she whispered, "being different is what makes you special. Those kids don't understand the gift you have." Jacob looked up at her with tears in his eyes. "But it hurts, Mom." Emily wiped his tears gently. "I know it does. But remember, even the greatest musicians were once told they were different. You have to believe in yourself no matter what." She made a promise to herself that she would protect her son's spirit, no matter what obstacles came their way. The next day, Emily went to the academy to meet with Jacob's music teacher, Mr. Collins. He was a tall man, with kind eyes and a gentle voice. She wanted to understand more about the challenges Jacob was facing. Mr. Collins explained that many gifted kids struggled to fit in. Their talents made them stand out, which sometimes made other children jealous or confused. But he believed Jacob had something rare, an ability not just to play notes, but to express feelings through music. "He's a young artist," Mr. Collins said thoughtfully, "and like all artists, he needs encouragement and patience." Emily felt a surge of hope. She decided to be Jacob's biggest supporter no matter what. Jacob's lessons became more intense. He spent hours practicing, sometimes until his fingers ached. The teachers helped him learn how to read music better, understand rhythm, and compose his own songs. He discovered that music wasn't just about hitting the right notes. It was about telling stories without words. Home. Emily would listen as Jacob played new pieces he was working on. Sometimes she didn't understand the music, but she could feel the emotion behind it. There were songs that sounded like laughter, others like whispers in the wind, and some that felt like a quiet sadness. Every melody was a little window into Jacob's heart. One evening, as Jacob played a soft tune by the window, Emily noticed a letter lying on the kitchen table. It was from Mr. Whitaker. She opened it carefully and read the words aloud to Jacob. "Dear Emily and Jacob, I am so proud of how hard Jacob is working. I have arranged for him to perform at a special recital next month. This is a chance for him to share his music with a bigger audience. I know he might be nervous, but I believe in him. Remember, every great musician started with a single note, played in front of just one person. Love, Charles." Jacob's eyes widened. "A recital. I don't know if I can do that." Emily smiled softly. "You can, baby. You're ready." The weeks leading up to the recital were full of practice and preparation. Jacob worked with his teachers to choose the perfect pieces. He composed one special song just for the event, a melody that told the story of his journey from the little piano in the restaurant to the big stage he was about to face. Emily saw how hard he worked, but she also saw his growing excitement. The fear in his eyes began to fade, replaced by something new: hope. The night of the recital arrived quickly. The Music Academy's concert hall was beautiful, with golden lights shining on polished wood floors and rows of seats filled with expectant faces. Emily sat in the front row, her hands tightly holding a small program with Jacob's name printed on it. Backstage, Jacob's fingers trembled as he sat at the grand piano. He took a deep breath and thought about everything he had been through: the long nights in the restaurant, his mother's tired smile, the man who had believed in him. He thought about the music inside him, stories he wanted to tell. When his name was called, Jacob stood and walked to the piano. The spotlight was bright and warm. He sat down, closed his eyes for a moment, and then began to play. The audience fell silent. The music flowed like a river, sometimes gentle, sometimes strong. Jacob's fingers moved with confidence and grace. Every note told a story of struggle and hope, of fear and courage. People in the crowd felt the emotions deep inside their hearts. When the last note faded, the hall erupted in applause. Jacob stood and bowed shyly, his face glowing with joy. Emily's eyes filled with tears as she clapped louder than anyone. After the recital, many people came up to Jacob to tell him how much they loved his music. Teachers praised his talent. Students wanted to be friends, and even some parents asked for his autograph. For the first time, Jacob felt like he truly belonged. But even as the applause faded, new challenges waited. At school, Jacob found that some classmates were jealous of his success. Rumors started to spread. Some said he was a teacher's favorite, others whispered that he wasn't really that good. Jacob heard the whispers and sometimes felt alone again. One afternoon, Emily sat beside him and held his hand. "Do you want to talk about it?" she asked softly. Jacob nodded. "They say I'm different. They say I'm not like them." Emily smiled gently. "You know what? Being different is a strength. It means you see the world in your own way. Those kids might not understand yet, but one day they will." Jacob looked at her and asked, "How do I keep going when it's hard?" Emily thought for a moment. "You remember why you play music?" "Right." Jacob nodded. "Then hold on to that," she said. "Let your music be your shield. And when things get tough, play louder, not with your hands, but with your heart." Jacob took a deep breath and hugged his mother tightly that night. As he practiced, he played with more passion than ever before. His music became stronger, more confident, as if he was telling the world that he was here to stay at the same time. Emily was working hard to build a better life for them. Her new job was going well. She made friends at work and even started taking classes in the evening to improve her computer skills. She dreamed of getting a stable job one day, one that could support her and Jacob without worry. Mr. Whitaker continued to check in on them, always quietly, never pushing. One afternoon, he invited Emily to lunch at a quiet cafe, over coffee. He asked how Jacob was doing and listened carefully as Emily shared both her hopes and fears. "I'm proud of you. Raising a child alone is not easy. You've done more than most." Emily blushed, but felt warmth inside. For the first time, she felt like someone truly believed in her too. Life wasn't perfect. There were still bills to pay. Nights when Emily worried about rent, and moments when Jacob missed the simplicity of the restaurant days. But now, they had a future to look forward to. One day, Jacob received a letter from a prestigious national music competition. He was invited to audition. This was the kind of opportunity that could change everything. He was scared but excited. Emily held his hand and whispered, "No matter what happens, I'm proud of you." Jacob smiled and nodded. Together, they were ready to face whatever came next. Jacob's invitation to audition for the national music competition brought a mix of excitement and nervousness to both him and Emily. This was a huge opportunity, one that could open doors to a future neither of them had dared to dream about before. But with this chance came new challenges and fears. Would Jacob be ready? Could he stand on such a big stage and show his true talent? What if he failed? Emily tried to keep her worries hidden, but inside her heart she was bursting with pride. In hope, she remembered how far they had come from playing piano in a crowded restaurant, two standing on the threshold of something extraordinary, in the weeks leading up to the audition. Jacob practiced harder than ever. Every day after school, he would sit at the grand piano in the academy's practice room, losing himself in music. He poured his soul into every note, every melody, every rhythm. His fingers danced over the keys with new confidence, but his mind sometimes battled with doubt. One afternoon, as Jacob was practicing a particularly difficult piece, his teacher, Mr. Collins, entered the room and listened quietly. When Jacob finished, Mr. Collins nodded with approval. "You've improved a lot," he said kindly. "But remember, competitions aren't just about technical skill. They're about telling a story. Your story." Jacob looked thoughtful. "But what if my story isn't good enough?" Mr. Collins smiled. "Everyone's story is important. Yours is special because it's real. Play from your heart, and the audience will feel it." That night, Jacob sat with his notebook, writing music late into the evening. He composed a new piece inspired by his journey, the struggles, the hopes, the love he shared with his mother. It was a song full of emotion, one he hoped would speak to the judges. Emily watched her son with admiration. She could see the determination in his eyes and the passion in his playing, but she also saw the pressure weighing on him. She wanted to protect him, to take away the fear, but she knew this was his path to walk. On the day of the audition, Emily woke Jacob early. She packed a small bag with snacks and a bottle of water, and together they walked to the music academy. The building felt different today, more serious, more important. The grand piano in the audition room gleamed under the bright lights. Jacob's hands trembled as he waited his turn. Other kids played before him, some confident, some nervous. The air was thick with tension. When his name was called, he stood and walked to the piano. The room was silent except for the soft shuffle of his footsteps. He sat down, took a deep breath, and closed his eyes. Then he began to play. The music filled the room, slow and steady at first, then rising in waves of emotion. Jacob played not just with his fingers but with his whole heart. The notes told a story of hardship and hope, of a boy who refused to give up. When he finished, there was a long silence. Then, slowly, the judges began to applaud. Jacob opened his eyes and saw their smiles. He felt a warmth spreading inside, a mix of relief and pride. Outside the audition room, Emily ran to hug him. "You were amazing," she said, tears in her eyes. Jacob smiled, feeling lighter than he had in weeks. "Do you think I did well?" Emily nodded. "More than well. Showed them who you really are." Days passed while the judges made their decisions. The waiting was hard. Jacob sometimes felt doubt creeping back, but Emily reminded him of the courage he had shown. Finally, a letter arrived. Jacob had been selected to compete in the national finals. The news was overwhelming.
Ouch.
Name would be listed among the best young musicians in the country. It was a chance to be seen and heard on a stage bigger than any he had ever imagined. Emily and Jacob celebrated quietly. They knew the journey was far from over, but this victory was theirs. The weeks before the finals were filled with preparation. Jacob worked with his teachers to perfect his pieces. He attended workshops to improve his stage presence and learned how to manage nerves. Emily supported him every step of the way, encouraging him to believe in himself. Yet, despite all the support, Jacob faced new challenges. Some students grew jealous of his success. They spread rumors and tried to undermine his confidence. One day, a group of kids whispered cruel things behind his back, making him feel small and isolated. Emily noticed the change. Jacob became quieter, more withdrawn. One evening, he told her about the bullying. "I don't understand why they don't." "Like me," he said sadly. Emily held him close. "Sometimes people are afraid of what they don't understand. But you're stronger than their words." She encouraged him to focus on his music and the people who believed in him. "You don't have to listen to the negativity. Your talent and heart are what matter." Jacob tried to hold on to her words, but the pain lingered. Then came the day of the national finals. Concert hall was enormous, filled with thousands of people. The bright lights, the cameras, the crowd. It was overwhelming. Backstage, Jacob felt his heart pounding. Words and the faces of the people who believed in him. When it was his turn, Jacob stepped onto the stage. The audience was silent, waiting. He sat at the grand piano and closed his eyes. The music began. His fingers moved confidently, telling the story he had written. The melody was rich with emotion, hope, struggle, love, and dreams. The audience was captivated. They listened intently as Jacob poured his soul into every note. When the last sound faded, the hall erupted into applause and cheers. Jacob stood and bowed, overwhelmed by the love and support. After the performance, the judges praised his talent and passion. He had not only played beautifully, but had connected with the audience in a way few could. Jacob didn't win first place, but he received a special award for most expressive performance. It was an honor that meant more than a trophy. It was recognition of his heart and spirit. Emily hugged him tightly after the ceremony. "You did it, Jacob. You showed the world who you are." Jacob smiled, feeling proud and hopeful. He knew this was just the beginning of his journey. Life after the competition brought new opportunities. Jacob was invited to perform at local events and charity concerts. He began to build a small following of people who loved his music. Emily's job improved too. With her new skills, she found a better position with more hours and a higher salary. They moved into a larger apartment in a safer neighborhood, with windows that let in sunlight and space for Jacob to practice. Through it all, Mr. Whitaker remained a steady presence. He continued to offer quiet support, never asking for anything. In return, Emily grew to see him not just as a benefactor, but as a friend. One afternoon, Mr. Whitaker invited Emily and Jacob to his home for dinner. His house was grand but warm, filled with books, paintings, and music as they ate. Mr. Whitaker shared stories about his own childhood and the loss of his son. Emily saw a side of him she hadn't known, a man shaped by grief but dedicated to helping others find light. He told Jacob, "Your music has brought me peace and hope. Keep playing, keep dreaming." Jacob felt inspired. He knew he wanted to use his gift to touch others, just as music had touched him. But the road ahead was still full of challenges. Jacob's health began to change. He felt tired more often and had difficulty catching his breath during practice. Emily grew worried. She took him to doctors who ran tests and gave uncertain answers. They told her to watch closely and be ready for anything. Jacob tried to stay strong, but the fear in Emily's eyes was contagious. She did everything she could: healthy meals, rest, gentle encouragement. She stayed by his side, determined to protect him from the shadows creeping into their lives. Despite his illness, Jacob refused to give up music. He continued to play, composing new songs that expressed his courage and hope. Emily realized that life was fragile, but so was hope. She held on to both with fierce determination. The community around them rallied too. Teachers, neighbors, friends, they all offered support and love. Fundraisers were organized to help with medical bills. Jacob's music inspired people, reminding them of strength in the face of adversity. Emily looked at her son one evening as he played a soft lullaby on the piano. She felt a deep gratitude for the journey they had shared, the hardships and the joys, no matter what the future held. She knew one thing for sure: Jacob's music would live on. A testament to a boy who dared to dream and a mother who never gave up. Jacob's journey had been filled with ups and downs, moments of joy and moments of struggle, but through it all, his love for music never faded. As time went on, Jacob grew not only as a musician, but as a person. The challenges he faced had taught him strength, patience, and hope. Even when his health became fragile, his spirit remained unbreakable. Emily was always by his side, her love a steady light in his life. She watched him continue to compose and play even when it was difficult. His fingers moved across the piano keys with a gentle determination that touched everyone who heard him. Each note was a story, a piece of his soul shared with the world. Jacob's illness was serious. The doctors told Emily that it might take time to understand the full picture, and sometimes treatments could be hard. But they also said that with care, love, and support, Jacob could have good days. Emily held on to those words tightly. She made sure Jacob had everything he needed: healthy food, rest, and above all, hope. At home, they created a sanctuary filled with music. The walls echoed with melodies that Jacob wrote, melodies that carried the stories of their life together. Emily encouraged Jacob to teach music to other children in their neighborhood. It was a way for him to share his gift and find joy in helping others. Jacob found comfort in these lessons. Watching younger kids learn and laugh while making music gave him a sense of purpose. It reminded him that even in hard times, beauty could grow. One afternoon, a neighbor named Mrs. Hernandez came to their door. She was an older woman with kind eyes and a warm smile. She told Emily that she had heard about Jacob's music and wanted to help. Mrs. Hernandez was a retired music teacher, and she offered to volunteer as Jacob's assistant during his lessons. Emily welcomed her with gratitude. Together, they worked to build a small music program for local children who couldn't afford lessons. It was a dream come true, a community coming together through music. Meanwhile, Jacob's health continued to fluctuate. Some days were good, full of energy and laughter. Other days were harder, with fatigue and pain. Emily never left his side. She learned how to care for him in new ways, researching treatments, talking to doctors, and making their home as comfortable as possible. Despite the difficulties, Jacob's music grew deeper and more meaningful. He composed songs that spoke of hope, courage, and love. His compositions were shared online and slowly began to touch the hearts of people far beyond their neighborhood. One day, Emily received an email from a music producer in the city. He had heard one of Jacob's songs online and was moved by it. He wanted to meet Jacob and discuss the possibility of recording an album. Emily was shocked but hopeful. She shared the news with Jacob, whose eyes sparkled with excitement and a bit of nervousness. This could be the break they had prayed for, a chance for Jacob's music to reach even more people. The meeting was arranged at a small recording studio. Downtown, Jacob, with Emily's steady hand in his, walked into the room filled with microphones and sound equipment. The producer, a friendly man named Sam, greeted them warmly. Sam listened carefully as Jacob played some of his original songs. He was impressed by the depth of feeling in the music and the unique style Jacob had developed. Sam explained that with some professional help, they could create an album that captured Jacob's voice and spirit. Jacob felt both nervous and excited. The studio was a new world, bright lights, many buttons, and lots of people working behind the scenes, but the music flowed naturally. Emily watched proudly as her son shared his gift. It's no longer just for their small world, but for anyone who wanted to listen. Recording the album took several weeks. Jacob worked with sound engineers and musicians, learning about mixing and production. It was hard work, sometimes tiring, but also full of discovery. Emily supported him every step, managing appointments, keeping the house running, and reminding Jacob to rest when needed. Their bond grew even stronger, filled with love and determination. When the album was finally finished, Jacob's music was released online and in stores. The response was incredible. People from all over the country reached out with messages of encouragement and thanks. Many shared how Jacob's music had helped them through their own struggles. Jacob was invited to perform at local events and radio shows. He became a symbol of hope and resilience, a young artist whose music carried the message that even in darkness, light can be found. But with success came new challenges. The demands on Jacob's time and energy grew. He had to balance school, music, healthcare, and his personal life. Some days were overwhelming. Emily worried about burnout, but encouraged Jacob to take care of himself. Through it all, they learned to say no when needed and to listen to their bodies and hearts. Jacob realized that rest was part of strength, not weakness. One special evening, Jacob was invited to perform at a large charity concert to raise money for children with illnesses. The event was held in a grand theater, filled with people who believed in the power of music to heal. As Jacob stepped onto the stage, he looked out at the crowd and saw the faces of many people who had supported him, friends, teachers, neighbors, and strangers alike. He felt their love and encouragement. He played his heart out, sharing songs that told his story of struggle, hope, and courage. The audience was moved to tears and applause. Jacob's music was not just notes and rhythms, but a message of resilience. After the concert, many approached Jacob to thank him. They told him how his music had inspired them to keep going. To believe in themselves, Emily watched quietly from the side, tears of pride streaming down her face. She thought back to the days when they struggled just to pay rent and put food on the table. Now her son was touching lives, changing hearts. Despite all the success, Jacob remained humble and kind. He never forgot where he came from or the people who helped him along the way. One afternoon, Jacob received a letter from a famous music school offering him a scholarship. It was an opportunity to study with world-class teachers and develop his talent further. Emily and Jacob were overjoyed. This was the dream they had worked toward, a chance for Jacob to grow even more at the school. Jacob met students from all over the world. The environment was challenging but inspiring. He worked hard, learning new styles, techniques, and ways to express himself. He also made friends who shared his passion for music. Together, they dreamed of making the world a better place through their art, though far from home. Jacob stayed connected with Emily. They called each other often and shared their daily lives. Emily continued her own journey, growing in her career and finding happiness. Jacob's health remained fragile, but he managed it with care and support. He learned to listen to his body, balancing work and rest. Over time, Jacob began to compose new pieces inspired by his experiences at the school and the people he met. His music became richer, blending influences from many cultures. Emily was proud to see her son becoming not just a great musician, but a thoughtful, compassionate person. Years passed, and Jacob's music touched more and more hearts. He performed at concerts, festivals, and events worldwide. Each performance was a celebration of life, hope, and the power of dreams. Through every note he played, Jacob carried the story of his journey, a story of struggle and triumph. Of a mother's love and a boy's courage. Emily often sat in the audience, tears shining in her eyes, knowing that their hard work, faith, and love had brought them to this moment. Jacob's music was more than just sound. It was a beacon of hope for anyone facing challenges. A reminder that no matter how difficult life may be, there is always a way to shine. Their story showed that with love, support, and belief in oneself, even the smallest beginnings can lead to something extraordinary. And so, Jacob continued to play, to dream, and to inspire, carrying his mother's love in every note.